Welcome to the Mastering Business Skills podcast, where we interview successful small business owners who share their own journey, mastering the skills they needed to grow and be successful in their business. Learn the struggles, the wins, and all the things they learned along the way, so you can cut down on your own learning curve.
Welcome to Mastering Business Skills. Today we're talking with Humza Adam, the founder and CEO of H Factor Solutions, a revenue growth acceleration firm specializing in B2B sales training, sales and marketing strategy consulting, and building high-value sales systems. His work has helped drive over $5 billion in revenue for organizations that he has worked with. Welcome to the show.
Well, it's my pleasure. Happy to be here.
Good. Great to have you. So tell us a little bit more about, what you do and how you support businesses.
Sure. If you like, I could start with my background and we can dive into that and how
Absolutely.
I got into doing what it is I do.
Yeah.
So my background is really quite varied. So I've worked in different industries from telecom all the way to aerospace. And before I started my own consulting company around close to 10 years ago now, I'd worked for an aircraft manufacturer. And I was part of the sales and marketing team. And so what that meant was I was basically flying around and going all over the place, interacting with C-suite executives and selling and marketing all our product lines of aircraft. Which was good fun. And I was also involved when the aircraft manufacturer I was working with was launching a brand new aircraft, right? And if you know anything about aircraft, you know that you don't get a new model every year. You're lucky to see one once every 20, 30 years, right? So it was a lot of fun being part of that team, launching it and getting it out there. But it was also quite challenging because now we were going up against the 800-pound gorillas of the industry, which were many times larger than us. And so it was essentially kind of David versus Goliath kind of battle. And so that made it really, really interesting. And, from my perspective, once we got a couple of key big orders on the books that were a couple of my accounts, I felt like I had climbed this mountain, gotten to the top, and the question was, what's next? What do I want to keep doing this? Do I want to do something else? And I always had the entrepreneurial bug, right? And I felt that all the skills, the resources, the capabilities that I have, these could benefit much smaller businesses. It's just they don't have the resources of a large aircraft manufacturer to be able to sell their solutions, their products as effectively as they could and they should. And I said, that's who I really want to help, because I always have, I would say, a liking to want to support kind of the underdog, right? The small businesses that, really are struggling to make it day to day. Right. And I felt that that's really where I belong. That's who I really want to help. And so I basically left the corporate world. And I started up my consulting company, and I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to help small, mid-sized businesses that want to grow but don't know how to. And they need systems, they need processes, they need good strategies. And I said, that's where I can help. So that's how I ended up getting into what it is that I do.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I know I think Sharon had in the intro billions in revenues. So I know you've brought in so much revenue for companies. So tell us a little bit, like, how do you help the businesses that you work with now in that area as far as bringing in, whatever their goal in numbers is?
Yes. So in terms of the billions, let me tell you the story where that comes in. So basically, when I was part of the aircraft manufacturing company, we were selling aircraft that were worth tens of millions of dollars, and we weren't just selling one or two; we were selling fleets of aircraft, right? And so now, when you're getting to big, complex sales like that, it's very easy to run up the numbers and get those zeros in there, right? But exactly the same principles and ideas work for for small businesses, whether they're selling 5-figure solutions, 6-figure deals, or sometimes even 7-figure deals, right? It's exactly the same concepts and ideas that work there, right? And so what I do in terms of helping businesses is the best way to think about the work that I do is to think of a triangle, right? And at the apex of the triangle, the top of the triangle, you have strategy. All right. And in terms of strategy, what I'm talking about here is your revenue strategy, or what we call the go-to-market strategy, right? So given the product or service that you're trying to sell, right, what's the best way to get that out into the market, right? What's the right strategy? What's the right approach, right? So that's the strategy piece. Then the second element of the second corner of our triangle is the sales systems and processes. So I'm very much a process oriented person, right? I think in terms of systems, I think in terms of connections between things, and I find that that's really the best way to think about kind of sales, right? Is all these different connections of things that need to happen in order to sell your product or service, right? And connecting marketing to sales. And so on that, in terms of that area, what I'm looking at is the different ways things are getting done and sometimes not getting done that should be getting done in the business from a revenue perspective. And figuring out what's the right processes and systems that we need to put in place so that we can basically have a system that works whether whether the business owner is here or not, right?
Right.
So building those effective systems and making sure that when a lead comes in, we know exactly what's happening with that lead over time until it gets converted, and then we're doing everything we possibly can to help that lead convert, right? And then the third area that I work with businesses on is on the sales talent side. And what I'm doing there is I'm basically working with the sellers in the business. So sometimes I'm working with the business owners themselves, right? Because they're looking for help and they want to be more effective, and they're the main rainmakers of the business, and they want to be more effective at being able to make it rain, right? In other cases, I'm training people who are, perhaps not at their level, but who want to aspire and become better at sales so that it can take the weight off the business owners, the leaders in the business who are the ones out there going and doing all the rainmaking. Well, what happens when they get sick? Well, you need to have other people who can do what needs to be done in order to generate the revenue, right? And depending on the organization I'm working with, some of them, they have the talent, but they haven't really developed that talent. In other cases, I'm working with actual sales teams where there are people whose job it is to go out and sell, right? And that's what they do on a daily basis. And I'm familiar with all the major selling methodologies out there. Some of them you may have heard of, like Sandler, Challenger Sale, and so on. And what I do is I basically, depending on the kind of culture we're trying to build in the organization, I essentially customize a training program, and it includes training as well as coaching, because I'm a huge believer in coaching. I believe that when you properly coach people, you can really unlock their potential, right? Rather than just giving them a bunch of content to go through and learn about. It's really about the ability to apply, the ability to do some self-discovery through those coaching conversations that really unlocks that potential, right? So on that corner of the triangle, that's kind of what I'm doing is really kind of enabling and unlocking the potential of the people in the business so that they can go out and sell very effectively.
Yeah, that's great. And that you're giving them that support that they need, because that's, I think, very much needed. So you talk about building high value sales systems. So what does, let's say, a simple sales system actually need to include?
Okay, so I'll share the framework that I use when building these systems for my clients, right? So the very first thing that I consider to be the foundation of any sales system is what I call having your ICP and UVP figured out. So what do I mean by ICP and UVP? ICP is ideal client profile, right? And what that means is understanding the details of who it is that you are meant to serve, right? So, and I'm not just talking about demographics, right? Well, that's important, right?
Right.
Things like age, gender, right? Title, things of that nature. That's all good and important, but there's more to it than that, right? Then you also have to look at geographics, right? So where are they
Mhm.
located, right? If you're selling into businesses, you need to look into firmographics, which is to say, what are the characteristics of the businesses that I need to target, that I need to sell to, right? And then on top of all of that, and I would say, more important than all the other factors I just mentioned is psychographics, right? And what psychographics is you're now getting into the aspects of how does this person really think? The person that I'm trying to go after, what's important to them? What are their challenges? What are their frustrations? What are their compelling desires that they want to and need to achieve, right? To meet their goals, to meet their own objectives, right? So it's understanding that at a very, very deep level, right? So getting to the human level, because while I do a lot of B2B, right? Businesses don't buy from other businesses. They buy
Right.
from people,
Right. Right.
right? So it's about understanding who it is that's on the other side and how can I best help this person, right? Or these people. Sometimes you have groups of people within businesses that you have to work with, right? So that's the ICP part of it. Then the UVP is the unique value proposition, right? And the idea behind the unique value proposition is essentially answering the question, why should they buy from me? Right? They have a bunch of options out there, right? There's a lot of other people, other businesses saying they can do what I can do, right? Why would they buy from me and nobody else?
Right.
Right? So, and I work with businesses to get that figured out. It sounds fairly simple, right? Or it sounds fairly easy, but
But it's
there's
not.
there's a lot
Yeah.
to it, right? Just even
Yeah.
unpacking that and coming up with the ICP and UVP, it takes some time because you want to get it right. Because like I said, it's the foundation of your business, right? And just like, if you were building a house on sand, right? If you don't have a good foundation, at some point, it's just going to collapse,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
So getting that right is really, really critical, right? And then the second element that I find is really, really important nowadays, more so than it was before. And I think this applies, definitely to B2B, but also to B2C companies as well, is having some level of thought leadership, right? So again, this picks up off of the UVP, but now you are becoming really visible with your differentiator and specifically how you think differently than most
Right.
other businesses in your space, right? Because
Right.
it's like everybody's, shouting into the void out there, right? There's so much noise.
Right.
So why would anyone pay attention to you? Right.
Mm.
So it really comes down to, what's your distinctive point of view? What's your perspective that makes people be like, wait, what? Right.
Right. What's your uniqueness?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
how do you think about problems, differently than everybody else in your
Right.
space,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Because most people are just saying the same stuff over and over again, right?
Right.
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 Yeah.
So that's essentially the idea there, right? And then the third element of building a sales system is doing what I call having a way of doing targeted outreach, right? So this isn't just waiting for stuff to happen, right? So a lot of businesses, particularly small businesses, they're relying on word of mouth, right? They're relying on passive referrals, right? Which is all great, right? But it's not going to be enough, right? And even businesses that are surviving on that, they are far below their potential, right? If you really want to reach your potential, you need to be able to go out and generate the business. You don't want to be at the whim of, whatever's, who had a conversation with who, right? You can't control that, right?
Yeah.
What you can control is what you do to generate the business, right? And being very targeted and having a system and having an approach for going out to the market, finding the right people and generating their interest, generating conversation, right? Is what's really ultimately going to lead to those opportunities and those sales, right? So a business that does not have that is missing a very big piece of a controllable sales system, right? Because this is something you can control. You can control how much activity you're doing that will generate those results. Whether it's marketing activity or sales related activity, you need to have that figured out. What are those activities and how can I do those activities in a way that's going to start bringing in those leads that we can start to work on, right?
Yeah.
So that's the third element of the system. The fourth element of the system is having or refining or building a good, what I call client acquisition system. So what do I mean by that, right? What I mean by that is what are the steps? What are the minimum steps that need to happen to take someone from being just a name on a list to being a true lead, right, or prospect, and turning that prospect into a paying customer, right?
Right.
Usually for every business, there's a certain series of things that need to happen, right? But because a lot of businesses operate in an ad hoc manner, they don't really have this documented or really figured out, right? And it's just whatever seems to work well, let's just kind of do that, right? But it's not an effective system, right? So what I'm talking about here is building an effective system. And yes, we have tools like CRMs, customer relationship management systems. There's so many of them out there. But the point is, just like diets, there's so many diets out there, right? Well, which one's going to work? The one you're going to stick with.
Right. Exactly. The one you're going to actually use.
Exactly. 100%. Right?
Yeah.
So you could have the fanciest CRM, but if nobody's using it, what's the point?
Yeah.
Right? So the idea here is really building out what we call the stages of our sales process, right? So we need to take a lead. We need to understand where they're at on their buying journey, and then we need to align that with our sales process, which is to say, what are we doing to help them make a buying decision, right? And the way I like to think about selling is it's not something that you do to someone, right? It is really something you do for and with someone, right? Ultimately, the way I like to think about it is you shouldn't really be thinking about yourself as selling as much as you should really be thinking about yourself as helping people buy. Helping people buy things that will improve their life, their business in some way.
Solve their problem, whatever.
Exactly.
Providing solutions.
Yeah, because I mean, we think about ourselves, right? You walk into a store and a salesperson comes up to you and says, how can I help you? What's the typical response? Just looking.
Just looking.
Right?
Yeah.
And why is that? Because we don't like to be sold. Right?
Yeah.
We like to buy, right? So if somebody's helping us make the right decision, do the comparison, figure out whether this is going to be the right fit, whether this looks good, right? They're adding value. They're helping us buy, right? So they're just trying to get their commission by selling us something. Well, that's a real turnoff, right? So it's important to have the right approach, right? So that's the client acquisition system, right? And then the next step is really having a way of tracking and measuring what's going on, right? So how good are we at taking those leads and progressing them, right? And I'm not just talking about, tracking, what percentage of our leads turn into customers. I mean, obviously that's good to know, but there's so much more you want to know in addition to that, right? So things like what is our conversion from one stage to the next? Where are the leaks in our bucket that we need to plug, right? Because ideally, in a perfect world, everything that comes in is going to come out as a revenue generating customer, right? But it doesn't always, well, typically there's no business that I know that gets 100%, right? But there are going to be leaks along the way. It's about understanding where those leaks are happening and what can we do about addressing those leaks and improving the conversion rates and streamlining the process so that we get more of those opportunities, because we do a lot of work to get those leads, right? Whether it's the marketing activities or the outbound outreach that we're doing, there's a lot of time, effort, and often money that is spent on that, right? Be a big shame if just because we didn't, do what we needed to do, those end up dying on the vine, and we've wasted all that money, time, and effort that was put into generating those leads. Right. So it's having a way of what I call a performance management system. So identifying how things are going and looking at where do we need to improve, right? What can we do better, right? And it's coming down to the numbers, right? The metrics. And this is where, when I work with companies, we can build dashboards to be able to identify what are things that we need to be focusing on, what are the areas that need improvement, and so on, and then can develop an action plan based on that. And then really the last step of this is in building the system is what I call sharpening the saw, right? And what I mean by that is really doing what we can to improve where the rubber meets, what happens where the rubber meets the road, right? So there's an old quote where it's like, give me 4 hours to cut down a tree, and I'll spend like the first 3 sharpening my axe, right? So that's kind of the idea where the human to human interaction is where the rubber meets the road, right? So what are you doing to improve your abilities to interact, engage, and build relationships with people who you want as your customers, right? So in this area, we're focusing on things like the prospecting skills, the ability to qualify, the ability to do what we call have a good discovery conversation, right? So the idea is essentially in a discovery, you're discovering what challenges, what needs, what opportunities a prospect has. But a lot of people stop at that. You really want to be thinking about it as, discovery being a two-way street. You want them to discover how great of a fit you are for them in terms of how your interaction goes, right? Because they're not going to know how great your product is until they buy it, right? But they're only going to be able to get a sense of that based on the interaction with you.
Right.
So what is that interaction communicating to them? Right. So that's something to really think about, right? And then there's presenting. How do we present once we've understood what challenges and opportunities they have? How do we put together a solution and present it in a way that's compelling and engaging and gets them to want to take the next step, right? And then you get into things like negotiation and ultimately closing, right? So it's working on all those skills to really improve our capabilities of helping people in the best possible way. So in a nutshell, those are really the 6 elements of the system in terms of if you really want to build effective sales systems that work day after day, hour after hour, week after week, month after month, and year after year.
Yeah. How long did it take you to come up with that system overall, or to
So
refine it?
this is something that had been germinating in me for really quite a while. And once I started my consulting business, I said there really needs to be a very straightforward process that everybody can understand, regardless of what type of business they're in. And really, the first few months of when I started my consulting company is when I really started to work on building this framework, right? So I would say it probably took me about 3 to 4 months to come up with a framework that I felt was really robust and would work really well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say much longer than that.
Well, yeah, I could say that really it was essentially my whole career, because
Right.
it's based on all of that
Yeah.
that I was
Right.
able to ultimately build
Right.
this framework.
Yeah. Yeah. So by the time you developed it, it was just a matter of kind of putting
Refine.
together all of it. Yeah. All of what you had learned. So, and then putting it in a perspective for a small business versus the huge companies that you're working with.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So where do you think, I mean, just a quick question here, where do you think that most businesses overcomplicate, or do they overcomplicate their sales system and process?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I see is that it really varies, right? In some businesses, there is no system.
Yeah.
It's all like you'll have a company, they have like maybe 10, 15, 20 employees, right? And there is no system. It's all in the business owner's head,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
right?
Yep. We've experienced
Been seeing
that.
It happens a lot, right? And now they want something happens, they realize it can't all just rely on me. Like all my employees, they're relying on me, right? What if I get sick,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
And
I want to go away and unplug for a couple of days or a week. Yep.
exactly, right? And yet there's no system, right? So how do you, even if you wanted to train somebody, what do you train them on?
Right.
Yeah.
Right? And how do you do that? Right? Especially if you're the business owner and you're not just responsible for sales, but you're responsible for virtually everything else.
Everything. Yeah.
Right? So how do you do that? So that's really a common challenge that I see, right? And what I tell to the business owner is I'm like, well, first of all, we need to document whatever's in your head, right? We need to start building the assets and the systems, right? And really kind of codify it and build your sales blueprint, right?
That's a good way to put it.
Because
Yeah.
once you have your sales blueprint and you know that it's a blueprint that works, well, now you have something that you can train people on.
Right.
Right.
Right. That's much like the SOPs. Erin and I are very big on businesses having SOPs for that very reason. You know, if you get sick, if you want to go on vacation, you can't be the only one that knows what to do everything. And so I love that, the blueprint. I love that term.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And this is what allows you and enables you to scale your business.
Exactly.
Right? Because you have this repeatable process, right? You bring more people in who are doing this repeatable process that generates more business.
Yes.
And it's more consistent, I would think, too.
Yes. 100%. Totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we do a lot of like onboarding and offboarding documents and stuff too, so that so it's always the same process if you're bringing and everybody's kind of got that consistent system and way of doing things versus just, oh, I think I took that person out of my system, but I don't remember, or I think
Right.
I think I disengaged from whatever I was in, and yeah.
Right. That's amazing.
Yeah. So tell us what's next for your business.
So where I'm going next is on this whole idea of systems. And this is something I've been, thinking about in the past few months now, and I'm going to do a bit more of a bigger push in the coming year, is building systems that consider would be anti-fragile, right? So what do I mean by anti-fragile? Where this comes from the work of Nicholas Nassim Taleb. He wrote the book Black Swan, right? Very popular, best-selling book. And the whole idea behind this concept of anti-fragile is you have things that are fragile, you have things that are robust, right? And the reality is being robust is not the opposite of being fragile. It's better than being fragile, but it's not the opposite of being fragile, right? What you really want to be is anti-fragile, right? And what the distinction is that obviously something that's fragile, if there is any change that happens, it breaks, right? So you have a very rigid system, for instance, right? And something happens to strain that system, right? That system is going to break.
Right.
A robust system is going to take a lot more to break it, right? It's going to be, more, it's going to have more staying power. Okay. But the best system is a system that the stressors and the strains that come on it actually make it stronger. It gets better the more it's tested. The more you try and break it, the better it becomes, right? So that's the concept of anti-fragile, right? And the idea that I have is really being able to build systems that become anti-fragile, right? Where they get better, right? Despite the adversity, right? Because I believe there's going to be a lot of adversity that's just going to be happening, right? There's a lot of chaos out there, right? And things aren't going to be getting any easier, whether you're thinking about interest rates, whether you're thinking about inflation, whether you're thinking about macroeconomical situations, trade wars, and things of that nature. There's just in actual wars, right? We have all of these things that are going to happen that are going to be affecting businesses. And some of the hardest hit are going to be the small businesses.
Yeah,
right.
That's true.
And so what I'm saying is that I believe that we can take the power in our hands by thinking a little bit differently about how we do things, so that we are not subject to the vagaries of all these external things that happen that we can't control, right? What we can control is the level of resilience that we have and that we build into our businesses, right? And that can be codified in terms of how we build those systems, right?
Yeah.
Are we building fragile systems? Are we building systems that are just going to be robust? Or are we thinking differently and building systems that are going to be anti-fragile, so that despite everything that's happening, our system is getting stronger and our business is getting bigger and better, right? No matter what happens. So that's kind of, maybe I'm getting a little philosophical here, but that's kind of the idea behind where I'm going next.
No, that's a great idea. That almost sounds like when I was listening to you, it almost sounds like earthquake proofing your business. I mean,
Exactly.
trying to build the strongest structures that you can to resist all the mess that's coming.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. Yes, you got it.
Awesome.
Nice. Well, Humza, thank you so much for coming on today and
Absolutely.
talking to us about all of this and covering all of it. And in the show notes, we're going to be dropping your LinkedIn and any other links, your website, things like that, so that people can reach out, connect with you, and hopefully work with you too. And to anybody listening in, we hope you join us next time for our next episode, and we'll talk to you all soon. Bye.
All right.
Bye. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
My pleasure.